You probably didn't expect to hear this, but President Trump is now considering a gun ban that hardly anyone saw coming. Not a ban on rifles, magazines, or accessories. This one is aimed at an entire group of people, and at first glance some may think it makes sense. But once you step back, the idea quickly collapses. Whenever Trump's name comes up, people rush to extremes. Either you cheer everything he does, or you're branded as against him. That mindset is toxic. Supporting a politician doesn't mean giving them blind loyalty. When Trump acts in favor of gun owners, that deserves credit. When he pushes something misguided, it deserves criticism. And this proposal, even if only an idea at this stage, is misguided. The context is a recent shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis. Immediately, the left called for more bans. You know the routine: blame the guns, blame the magazines, demand restrictions. That script never changes. But what surprised everyone this time was Trump himself raising the possibility of blocking gun ownership for transgender people. Now, some will nod along, pointing to the mental health crisis in that community. But before agreeing, remember history. During Trump's first term, bureaucrats wanted to strip veterans with PTSD of their gun rights. The justification was that these veterans faced higher suicide risks. Trump rightly reversed that effort, acknowledging it was unfair. Veterans served their country, struggled with trauma, but did not deserve collective punishment. And here's the irony: the trans community also faces high suicide rates. If it was wrong to punish veterans as a group, how is it right to punish trans people as a group? The logic doesn't add up. Think about what happens if this logic spreads. Should white men be banned because statistically they commit most mass shootings? Should black men be banned because crime rates are higher in certain cities? Nobody would accept that. Stripping rights based on demographics or identity is unconstitutional and absurd. Yet, that's exactly what this new proposal resembles. There's already a framework in place for legitimate cases. Federal law blocks individuals adjudicated as mentally defective or committed to institutions from buying guns. That safeguard exists on every background check. Form 4473 asks the question directly. What Trump is considering skips due process altogether. It assumes guilt before any action is taken and lumps millions together based only on identity. That's not justice. And here's the bigger issue. Bans like this don't stop those intent on violence. People determined to cause harm will still find weapons. They'll bypass the legal system, buy illegally, or exploit loopholes. The only ones restrained are the citizens following the rules. That has always been the flaw with sweeping bans. They target the wrong people. If this idea moves forward, it won't stop with one group. Once government claims the power to block rights based on collective risk, that precedent can extend anywhere. Veterans, seniors, people on certain medications, anyone could be labeled too risky. And if you think that kind of logic won't eventually reach you, history suggests otherwise. That's why this proposal is dangerous. It doesn't address the root of violence, it doesn't fix mental health, and it doesn't make communities safer. What it does is create a new category of second-class citizens who lose rights not because of what they've done, but because of who they are. That is a betrayal of the very principles the Second Amendment stands for. So, yes, Trump has done good for gun owners in the past, but this time he's wrong. And it's important to say, so even if it's unpopular because protecting rights means holding every politician accountable when they cross the line, here's the reality about proposals like this. They don't hit criminals, they hit the people who follow the law. Every time new restrictions come down, it's the law-abiding citizen who gets stopped at the counter while the criminal shrugs and buys on the street. That pattern never changes, and yet politicians keep repeating it. We've already seen examples. Remember the push to use the no-fly list as a basis to deny gun rights. People could land on that list by mistake or without due process and still lose a constitutional right. That was outrageous then, and it would be outrageous now. But the logic behind it is the same as what Trump is floating: collective punishment without individual judgment. Another case was Social Security. There were serious proposals that if you received assistance, you'd lose your right to own a firearm. Think about that. Seniors who worked their entire lives, who paid into the system, suddenly told they couldn't defend themselves because they needed some help with daily tasks. That's not safety. That's government stripping independence from the very people most vulnerable to crime. Then there's the talk about medication. Anxiety meds, ADHD prescriptions, antidepressants, millions of Americans use them responsibly. Yet some argue that anyone taking them should automatically lose gun rights. That's not how freedom works. If you're managing a condition, functioning, living a normal life, why should the state brand you dangerous? It makes no sense. These examples all share one thing. They treat identity status or condition as grounds to erase rights. That's exactly what this trans ban represents. It doesn't judge individuals on their behavior. It doesn't wait for evidence. It just declares an entire group unfit. And if you think the line will stop there, it won't. Once the precedent is set, politicians will keep expanding it. Now I understand why Trump might look in this direction. He's focusing on mental health. And yes, mental health is a crisis in America, but banning groups of people doesn't solve it. It doesn't ease depression. It doesn't reduce suicide. It doesn't give anyone hope. It just adds stigma and fuels resentment. If we want to address mental health, we need treatment, not bans. The statistics back this up. There are more than 400 million firearms in circulation and tens of millions of gun owners. Yet less than a fraction of a percent are used in crimes. Guns themselves aren't the cause. Look at Chicago and Baltimore, both places with some of the toughest laws and still some of the highest crime. The supposed link between tighter laws and safer streets doesn't exist. At the same time, overall gun ownership has increased nationwide while crime has dropped. That's the fact almost nobody in politics wants to admit. More citizens exercising their rights hasn't led to chaos. It has coincided with a decline in violence. That tells us the issue isn't the presence of firearms, it's the condition of individuals who choose to misuse them. And that brings us back to the trans community. Yes, suicide rates are higher there. That's tragic. But banning guns won't change the inner despair or confusion. It won't fix the struggles with identity or mental health. It just tells people they are second-class citizens. That doesn't help anyone. And it opens the door for the same logic to be used against veterans, seniors, or anyone else deemed inconvenient. That's the danger. What looks like a narrow measure becomes a tool to expand government power. And once it's normalized, it can and will be used on broader groups. That's why this idea must be rejected, not only because it targets one community unfairly, but because it threatens the rights of every single American. The deeper you look, the more obvious it is that guns are not the problem. America's real crisis is mental health, and it has been worsening for decades. The proof is right in front of us. Since World War II, this country has carried some of the highest suicide rates in the developed world, even with widespread gun ownership. Meanwhile, Japan, where almost no one owns a firearm, still faces some of the highest suicide numbers. That alone destroys the claim that guns are the driving factor. But politicians don't like tackling root causes. That requires hard work and accountability. It's easier to find a target, make a ban, and declare victory. It makes for a quick headline, but leaves the real issue untouched. When Trump entertains a ban on an entire group, he's falling into the same trap, aiming at the surface, while the deeper crisis grows unchecked. Look at Chicago, Baltimore, and other cities where gun laws are strictest. Crime is still rampant. If banning firearms worked, those places would be the safest in America. Instead, criminals dominate while ordinary citizens are left defenseless. That's the reality. Criminals ignore new laws, and law-abiding citizens pay the price. So what would actually make a difference? First, real accountability for crime. Violent offenders should be prosecuted and kept off the streets, not released with minimal punishment. The soft-on-crime policies that have taken root in so many cities have turned them into danger zones. Disarming the innocent while ignoring the guilty doesn't create safety. It only deepens chaos. Second, we need to face mental health honestly. The trans community is being singled out right now, but struggles with depression, anxiety, and identity confusion run across society. Millions suffer, but instead of digging into causes, the system rushes to medicate, affirm confusion, or silence dissent. That isn't compassion, it's avoidance. It leaves people hurting and often worse off. Other countries are beginning to rethink their approach. Some are backing away from puberty blockers and surgeries for minors after realizing the irreversible harm, bone density loss, infertility, heart problems, lifelong regret. Too often, these drastic steps don't reduce despair, they increase it. That's a conversation America refuses to have, and instead the solution offered is take away the guns. But if someone is determined to do harm, they'll find a weapon. It might be a gun, but it could just as easily be a knife or a car. Evil adapts. And that's why this proposal is so dangerous. It doesn't reduce violence, it just creates a new injustice. Once government starts carving out exceptions to the Second Amendment, the precedent spreads. Today it's one community. Tomorrow it's veterans, seniors, or anyone taking medication. Before long, gun ownership is no longer a right, it's a privilege handed out to the favored and denied to the disfavored. That's not liberty, that's control. This isn't just about guns, it's about the principle that rights belong to individuals, not groups. When you start treating rights as negotiable based on identity, they disappear piece by piece. That's why even supporters of Trump need to be honest here. He's done good things for gun owners before, but this idea is wrong. Wrong constitutionally, wrong morally, and wrong strategically. So here's where I stand. If we want safer communities, we deal with crime directly and confront the mental health epidemic head-on. We don't strip rights from millions who've done nothing wrong. Bans won't fix despair, and they won't stop criminals. What they will do is erode the foundation of freedom for everyone. That's my take. Now, I want to hear yours. Do you believe this proposal would make anyone safer, or do you see the same dangers I do? Leave your thoughts below. And if you value straight talk without the sugarcoating, consider subscribing. Until next time, stay sharp, stay free, and hold the line. https://prnt.ecpkxcpdil